morning, Breakup Gang. Hope you're doing well. Good morning, Bitcoiners. Hope everyone's doing well. Tom, indeed. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Jocko, good morning. Listening while fiat mining. Good for you. There's no bad place to be listening. Absolutely no bad place. Daniel with a good morning, Breakup Bunch. P-Man Fan, what's up, everyone? Indeed, what is up, everyone? Robert. Good morning, people. Indeed. Tommy, good morning. Good morning. Tommy is the creator of my wonderful new logo here, the Breakup, in beautiful 8-bit graphics, which we love. CK, what's up, my man? Good morning, fam. Indeed, good morning. I think CK's at the gym. Some people like to mine fiat while they're listening. Other people like to go to the gym. I love the people who garden, too. A lot of fun, right? Christian reminds us all, CK, that's his real name, by the way, reminds us all to smash the like button, which we like. Good morning, Ohio, stealing Bitcoin graffitis. State morning greeting. Ohio gozaimasu, Kevin. But Kevin goes back to the old days, so he's absolutely allowed to steal from Bitcoin graffiti. No problem. Bon matin, good morning, Bitcoiners. TGIF. Indeed, it is Friday. We are happy. Today is the DCA Friday, which we love. Not sure I have enough money this week. I'll buy a little bit. Even $50 counts, right? Even $50, a couple sats worth stacking on this day. But before we get into stuff talking about stacking sats, let's just acknowledge we got a massive sunrise, but I had to use a light this morning because it's gray again. It is a super gray summer so far, but we're loving it anyway. Who can complain, right? Bitcoin's running, so let's have a coffee and talk about what's new. All right. So, as you know, we like to start every single morning with the fakest news we can find. If you didn't know, right, they're having all kinds of trouble in China too with the global warming, and there's all kinds of flooding. It's no good, right? It's really bad. And Reuters here wrote a headline. Now you got to pay attention. You got to go close. You got to really pay attention to this one to see the Moscow time in it, but it's a good one. Record heat and historic floods in China this summer have failed to ignite domestic public debate about how the world's top carbon polluter can mitigate climate change, leaving campaigners frustrated at an opportunity missed. Right? So let me break down the Reuters headline. Right? They didn't get to have a fight. And the people who are arguing you for to be afraid missed a chance. Okay, so that's the other way of saying the headline. Too bad nobody fought over the heat in China, and it's a shame that the campaigners missed out. Right now, we're not adding punchlines. Right? We're not adding punchlines. Now, if you're just focused on the Chinese situation about global warming, it's a global problem. It's not just China, right? So of course they've got some advice for Americans, right? So Americans also they're okay with the amount of fighting we're doing about it, right? So that part's taken care of, right? We haven't missed an opportunity to fight about it in America, unlike the poor Chinese. They've missed an opportunity to fight about it. But CNN says here, climate change fueled extreme heat will significantly increase the risk of heat-related illness for the millions of people who visit Grand Canyon National Park every year. All right, so a National Park Service study has found. So in case you're wondering, right, global warming is everywhere, but it's also particularly in Grand Canyon. Okay, so if you didn't know, the planet, right, gets warm. But also the scientists have to tell you that even though the whole planet and everything included is getting warmer, according to them, also the Grand Canyon is getting warmer. Okay. If you couldn't figure that out, the experts have told you that the world and Grand Canyon both getting warmer. This one's awesome. This is in New York Post, right? Mom refuses to get rid of her daughter's head lice because she's a vegan. And it reminds me of a joke. This isn't a punchline about this. Some of you might know it. But how do you know if someone's a vegan? How do you know? Do you know what signs, right? How do you tell if someone's a vegan? Well, the answer is don't worry, they'll tell you. Don't worry. You'll find out soon enough, right? So if it's not just lice, right, they'll tell you. Don't worry. Don't worry. This one's good. This is from my home sweet Canada. We love fake news out of Canada. So the WHO, Canada, letting everyone know, the WHO classifies the EG.5 as COVID-19 variant of interest. Isn't that a good one? Variant of interest. I love it. I love this. I hope this catches on. I hope Canada really exports this new way of framing COVID, a variant of interest. A variant of interest. Amazing. It's a variant of interest. So I got a series here. It's Trump specific, of course. But this one's really great. I'm not sure if it's new or if it's old. All right. Sometimes I can't tell because it was a screenshot of what's going on television. And it was Max Boot. If you guys don't know who Max Boot is, so Max Boot wrote a book that I read many years ago, which I actually liked. It was called The Savage Wars of Peace. It was the history of American conflict outside of its major wars. Really interesting book, actually. I read that when I was in law school. That's how I knew about Max Boot in the first place, because this book came across my table. But I didn't understand at the time that he was absolutely an Operation Mockingbird asset. I didn't even understand what that was back then, right? And I thought he was just a guy writing books. So he actually, is one of those people that if you see him, right, if you see Max Boot coming out anywhere, this writer, this thought boy from the Washington Post, just understand that that's when they're putting out the people who will just shamelessly lie about anything, right? So if you see Max Boot come out, just understand this. It's the thing that only some people are willing to lie about, like in the open, right? There's not everyone who's jumping to lie about all these things. Like if they've got a really big one, right, they put Adam Schiff because he'll lie about anything, right? So when there's the go-to liars, right? So if you see Adam Schiff, if you see Nadler, right, and as far as congressmen, right, if you see Jim Acosta, right, he's another one, right? If you see Bump from the Washington Post, it's a scam, right? We're going to talk about him today. There's a few of these people that the minute they show their face, you just know the opposite is true. You just know, right? And so Max Boot is one of those people. He's one of those people that the minute he shows his face, you got to discount, or you got to think the opposite of what he's saying. But this one is great, right? So he did a whole list. I don't know if it's new or old. He published this in the Washington Post years ago, so I don't know. But the actual screenshot is just too good. So he's there saying 18 reasons Trump could be a Russian asset. And I'm going to give you the 18 reasons. Financial ties to Russia, right? Financial, which have all been disproven. But did they send him a check in his name to his personal checking account? We don't know. We don't know. Election hack to favor Trump, of course, right? Russia, if you're listening. So this is the one where Russia, where he does when Trump did his solo speeches, all of his rallies. And he asked Trump, Russia, if you're listening, that's proof that he's in the bag. 101 context: Carter Page, Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, fired Comey, refuses to acknowledge hacking, undermines FBI Justice Department, undermines the NATO, supports populists, praises Putin, interpreter notes, repeats pro-Russian talking points, pulling troops from Syria, Ukrainian ships sowing chaos per Russian objectives. So if ever you see this guy, right, if ever you see Max Boot, just forget whatever. Think the opposite, right? Think the opposite. He's not a real person. He's not. You remember the lady? That is not a real person. That's who she was pointing at. She was pointing at Max Boot. He's not a real person, right? He's just a Mockingbird asset. So there's unbelievably, there's an article in MSNBC by Steve Bannon. He's another one of these people that you can just discount instantly, right? Just discount Steve Bannon instantly. He wrote this big long thing yesterday, and you can see. So one of the greatest things that's happening with the Trump arresting him, but Hunter simultaneous, it's as sort of on brand as COVID. But because it's happening after COVID, and COVID times, even I, who is, dispelling the machinery of media as a regular sort of morning coffee talk, and I've been doing this kind of stuff for years, right? Talking about media, obviously talking about Bitcoin, but in particular talking about brainwashing in media and how all of this stuff works. Even I, at the beginning of COVID, thought the news was sort of like, at least a portion of it was real, at least a portion, right? At least some of it was real. I knew that some things were happening at certain levels, but I didn't understand just how pervasive the corruption of the media really was. And COVID helped, I think, peel off the blinders on everyone's eyes. And to see a story like Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, Trump getting arrested 4 times in the summer come to us at this point with all that we've already learned, you can see the picture much more clearly. It's almost impossible to not see anymore. And you can tell how this information laundering system works, how opinions are literally uploaded and then uploaded by the propagandists and then downloaded straight into the brains of the people who will just consume it, right? So Steve Bannon is one of those hypnotists. Not a very good one, right? He's not a very good one. You've got to be hypnotized already for him to have any effect. But he's here pushing this talking point that you've heard all the time now, right? It's just the best. And it's the one where they go, oh, but the money didn't go into Joe Biden's account. They keep showing all this money going to all these people everywhere, but it doesn't go into Joe's account. So that's the talking point. So that's him. And this is the article where he's trying to layer that talking point into people's opinions. And this is what it looks like, right? So he says, James Comer isn't doing GOP any favors with latest anti-Biden dud. It's a dud, right? The 20 accounts thing, the 20 million, that's all a dud. It's a dud. Okay, it's a dud. And here's what he says, right? Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer tried and failed again to produce fresh anti-Biden information. If he thinks he's helping the GOP, he's mistaken. So here's what he goes, right? Here's what he says, right? He goes on, you might have seen him. He's a loser. Oh, he's so embarrassing, right? It's always the embarrassment thing, right? It's all embarrassment, as we've mentioned many times. And it's what you need as a Bitcoiner to always remember. Don't be embarrassed when people tell you this or that, and they try and shame you. We talked about it in the Bob Dylan song yesterday about the assassination of JFK. They'll mock you and they'll shock you, right? You have to ignore this part, right? And early Bitcoiners and people who are still into Bitcoin today have learned this for a long time. We've never been embarrassed about being Bitcoiners. It's been used against us perpetually, right? It's still used against me weirdly, because I know enough sort of rich fiat people who are successful in the old fiat world and still don't have to consider Bitcoin. Like, it still hasn't quite, their house is still worth a lot of money and all this stuff. So they're not really worried about collapse, right? They're still not understanding to what extent the world is changing around them. They're going to find out, but we're going to talk about it today. But I still meet these people. Oh, that Bitcoin thing, is it still happening? When are you going to get a real? I still have people who, like, I don't want to sound like a douche, right? I don't want to sound like a douche, right? But they're not as successful or wealthy as I am, right? I don't want to sound like a douche, and I did. Okay, so just ignore that for a second. But the point is, I still have to sort of bite my pride and not react, right? It's still sort of a waiting game. I still have to, because you're not going to convince them, right? You still have to be like, yeah, Bitcoin, yeah, crazy, right? Yeah. So these are the type of people that are still listening to the Steve Bannon type of stuff, right? These are the people who are still saying, well, he made a good point, right? I'm brainwashing. I'm mind reading them a little bit. But here's what he says, right? Here's what he says. This is them putting talking points into people's minds, and this is how the idea that opinion and news get blended in people's brains, and this is how it happens. This is the milkshaker right here. In total, Comer, according to the memo from his staff, has identified more than 20 million in payments from foreign sources, writ large to the Biden family members or their associates. But here's the big kicker. But the memo, the third Comer has released so far this year, also doesn't show any direct payment to Biden. Boom, boom, mic drop. Didn't pay him directly. Boom, you have no proof. Biden, it didn't go exactly to his account. It would be like saying, they didn't send the Bitcoin to his wallet. They just sent it to wallets that we don't know who they're associated with. Come on, it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing, right? So he goes on. He goes, look, this is Steve Bannon. Look. I'm going to read in his voice. Look, I've tried to keep an open mind about this. Sure, I've been skeptical about the endeavor. I gave him a bit of time here, right? He said all this money, but I was going to listen for like a second, right? But he was boring. They're boring is what he's saying, right? But I made a good faith effort to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, Comer and his colleagues might uncover some shred of incriminating evidence that would warrant a serious explanation from the White House, right? Maybe the White House has to answer about this. Maybe it's going to get to the level, well, even I will ask the White House about what's going on, right? But these repeated Republican failures are just embarrassing. They're embarrassing, guys. Don't ask about the president and the money. Right? Don't. It's embarrassing. Come on, don't be embarrassed. Don't be. You're going to be impolite. It's like you're basically farting at the dinner table, guys. Don't burp and fart at the dinner table, idiots. Right? So he says the fact that members of Biden's family and associates who knew members of the president's family received money from foreign sources isn't that interesting. It's not interesting, guys. It's not interesting. It's not interesting, right? If it were the basis of a credible scandal, Congress would almost certainly have to investigate the enormous amount of money that Donald Trump and his immediate relatives received from all kinds of foreign sources, right? So this is the one where, because Donald Trump has a billion-dollar business of licensing products around the world, it's the exact same as the Bidens. They get money from foreign sources. Remember Ivanka? Remember she was selling like clothes and makeup and fashion, and the Chinese said, oh, we're not going to let you sell them here, but then we are if Trump does certain stuff. That's the same thing, right? Products. Now, what are the products the Biden family sells? He doesn't really get into it here. He doesn't get into the licensing business or the multiple skyscrapers and real estate holdings that Donald Trump has, right? Doesn't bother with that. That's all just, that doesn't matter, right? How can you explain it, Donald Trump? You were only in business for 40 years in America. How do you explain all the wealth, right? Joe Biden, on the other hand, has never had a product or service or anything, but he's been a public servant, and that's all fine, right? That's okay. That's okay. No problem. So he goes on, a humiliating dud followed, right? This is him talking about the Comer thing again, the 20 million. After months of desperate searching and thorough investigating, Comer conceded that he still didn't have any actual evidence. He has no evidence. He conceded. By the way, if you guys didn't hear it, no one in the GOP is following this anymore. They've conceded. There's nothing there. That's what Steve Bannon is writing in MSNBC. No one's even looking. It's over. Come on, guys. We saw it was all over when we saw the money didn't go into Biden's actual account. All of his family and his granddaughter is getting money for no product or service or skills or anything, right? None of that matters, right? None of that matters. None of that matters, right? So he goes on, and this is the conclusion, right? He's effectively throwing junk food at the base, but that won't satisfy them for long. On the contrary, by getting Republicans' hopes up, Comer has actually made matters worse. GOP officials and voters have been led to believe he'll eventually deliver devastating proofs of Biden's imagined crimes. They're imagined. They're imagined. They're imagined. Except Comer won't, and he can't do any such thing. The sooner he cuts his losses and acknowledges reality, you got to acknowledge reality, everyone, the better, right? Acknowledge reality. Just acknowledge some reality, and everything will go away. This is the best. This is also great, right? This is the Lawrence. I don't even know his name, but he's another MSNBC guy. Look at. We didn't know this, but he's got some of the greatest mind reading skills ever, right? So I don't know why he's stuck just being a journalist with his mind reading abilities. He should really try to find new applications for the mind reading, because he's mind reading lawyers here. That doesn't sound easy. Like, I bet you if you're a mind reader, there's like a difference, right? If someone isn't as smart or their knowledge isn't that sophisticated or anything like that, I bet you can mind read those people easier than people who have sort of sophisticated thoughts. Like, I feel like it would be harder to mind read someone with like an IQ, like Elon Musk kind of would be harder to mind read because his IQ is so high, but low IQ people, maybe it's easier. I don't know. I'd have to ask this Lawrence Donald, I think is his name. I don't even know his name. He says Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyers live in abject fear of Donald Trump. Oh, they do. Wow. And you can see the fear on their faces when they are confronted with Donald Trump's poison. Oh, okay. So you see it in their face. Okay, I get it. He's got like a thing where he can see a face and then know what you're thinking. I get it, MSNBC. You got superpowers, man. Just amazing stuff. But I think in the end, what this underlines, right, is that we now can see the machinery that's going on in the brainwashing systems that are all around us. We can now see the pitched lines in American media. We can see how brainwashing works, how diversion works, how information laundering works. These are the things that we talk about all the time here on the Breakup, but it has never been so easy to talk about it as now, right? It was much harder to describe some of these things pre-COVID. You were not working on as stable footing as you are now. You weren't seeing them forced to come out and lie on a perpetual daily basis, and being forced to come out and lie on a perpetual daily basis where everyone can see it actually trains the system much quicker. We are very similar to large language models, right? We're pattern recognition machines. And the more patterns we see, the easier they are to recognize. And in the same way that they're training LLMs all the time on human dialogue and human conversation and human interaction online and these kinds of things, the more we are getting trained currently with things like the Hunter Biden story, and before it was the Trump story. Trump, in his incredible being, has been one of the more important forces to force this technique out into the open. For us to be able to be trained on who's a liar and who isn't, has a lot to do with what buttons Trump has been pushing over the years, right? He's sort of, and it's the reason why I've always been a fan of Trump. I knew he would sort of destabilize reality. And the reason I knew he would destabilize reality as we knew it was simple. It was because I had thought of him the minute I saw him more as an artist. And by that, I mean, an artist isn't really capable of self-censorship, and they kind of got to say what's on their mind. You know, you can compare, and the reason I did this is because, you know, Penn and Teller, and they have Trump derangement syndrome, right? Their brains are broken from Trump as president, but they were once on The Apprentice, so they got to know Donald Trump close up and got to see him. And at the very beginning of the campaign, before they had lost their minds with Trump derangement syndrome, they made the analogy of Trump being like Bob Dylan. And that's what made me think about it right away. And that was exactly what Penn described, that Trump was incapable of self-censorship. That's why he says stupid shit all the time, right? Now, as someone who was very worried about what Obama was practicing as far as self-censorship goes, and not saying what he means, and using focus groups and all kinds of speechwriters to manipulate, you know, that whole thing made me very worried. And I was more worried about self-censorship at the time than I was about anything. So Trump, to me, modeling the inability to self-censor, because he's not capable. Like he can't do it, right? He can't do it. He's just not capable of self-censorship. It's not a skill he has. He's got a million other skills. Self-censoring, just being quiet when it's time. Nope, he doesn't have that skill, which is what I wanted, right? Now, I to this day will always acknowledge why there are some people who will never like Trump, right? That inability to self-censor is also connected to his bullying nature. He is a bully, okay? I will always admit Donald Trump is 100% a bully, 100%. And I get why there are people who will never be able to get over it. I've always understood that. I do not want to persuade those people about the good merits of Trump. This stuff goes deep into their psychology, and I'm not going to go and touch on that, right? So I'll always afford people the space they need to not like Trump. Right. I don't think you need to force Trump on anyone. He's absolutely a madman who I love, but you don't need to force what he does on everyone. But the point is that because Trump was incapable of self-censorship, that he would force the truth out and would seek the thing that can't be unspoken, right? Because that's really what he does a lot of the time. The thing that everyone knows you can't say is what he's going to say. The minute he identifies a thing that people are avoiding saying out loud, he'll say it out loud, right? Now, I'm sure he's got some manners, and I'm sure he knows, you know, in some instances in private what to say and what not to say, but I don't know that. I can imagine he doesn't. And so it's because of that. It's because Trump pushed himself into that point to force people to lie. And by forcing people to lie, he's allowed us all to get trained on what lying looks like. We would have probably never had this data set available to us in order to train our eyes and our minds on what lying looks like. So you've always got to appreciate what he did. You just have to, right? And now here's, for example, this is from John Stossel yesterday. And here we're going to understand a little bit about why lying and spin and all this becomes so pervasive, and why some people even can convince themselves it's true, right? So here's what he says. The John Stossel article says scientists admit the overwhelming consensus on climate change crisis is manufactured. All right, so that's a headline that he wrote yesterday. Now, if you don't know, John Stossel is one of the bigger libertarians around. He's been a Bitcoiner for a long time. It's not new that he came up with this point of view, right? But Scott Adams breaks it down and says the following. He says, the 98% of scientists agree belief is manufactured by a system that financially rewards alarm and punishes non-alarm. The 98% illusion works because humans are unaware of how corrupt scientists are. And the public does not understand that the follow the money frame works every time. But I think the pandemic woke us up. Now you can see the machinery of the fraud. It's as clear as the Biden crime family, which means CNN will ignore it. So you're not going to hear about it, right? You're just not going to hear about this kind of stuff. But in the end, I don't think it's going to matter, right? You don't really have to argue and use words to show people these things. In the end, people feel it. In the end, people perceive it. In the end, it becomes the reason why art, for example, is created, right? And now everyone this morning, I don't know if you guys have heard it. I don't know if you guys are paying any attention to it. I don't know if you've spent any time last night or this morning online, but there is a song and a music video that's going super viral, right? And it's called Rich Men North of Richmond. And if you haven't heard it, you got to go and listen to it like right after this or whatever. And all it is a fella in the woods with his little hunting cabin behind him and his dog, singing one of the most beautiful songs you're ever going to hear in real American music tradition. Now, what I will say, as someone who loves America, I love America. I love the United States of America with all of my heart. And I continue to be just amazed about all the amazing inventions that have come out of America by people who have moved to America, people who have come to America, people who were born in America, but it all seems to happen in America, right? And all of these amazing inventions. And I think it's going to change. The rest of the world is going to come up with all kinds of cool stuff going forward. But for this, 200 and whatever years, right? Europe didn't do shit. It all came from America, right? From people coming to America, the American system produced all this stuff. But America's greatest invention, above all the inventions that they've ever done, microchips, computers, the internet, all of the cars, all of it, right? America's greatest invention is music. Actually, it's music. Now, I warn you all the time about music being an unbelievable drug, and that you should be careful about music, right? You shouldn't listen to sad music in the morning. You shouldn't listen to sad music unless you really need to be sad for some reason and get over something. This song's a little sad, right? It's a little bit sad. I just want to warn you about when I warn you about music, it's just to say how powerful it is. It's not to say, it's dangerous and be careful all the time. I don't really mean that, right? I'm telling you that it shouldn't be just done casually, right? You shouldn't just throw some music on and it won't have an effect on me. That's all I'm trying to do is let you know that if you're listening to sad music every morning, guess what you're going to be, right? Yeah. So all I'm trying to do is express that music can be dangerous, but that doesn't change that I respect the hell out of music and think of music as not only powerful, super important in our society. And so this fella has written this song, and I just got to tell you some of the lyrics in it. And he's got one where he says, what is it? Getting into what we all see with, surveillance capitalism and even just the government, knowing everything about you. He says, they want to know what you think. They want to know what you do. And they don't think you know, but I know that you do. And your dollar ain't shit, and it's taxed to no end, right? And so the whole point of this story is your dollar ain't shit. And what did I say a long time ago, right? I've said it from the beginning of this show, talking about China again, and how one of the things that has to happen in the fourth turning, in Americans waking up, in the world changing, and in completing the thing that Satoshi Nakamoto started in 2008 by separating money and state. And then you get Trump who came in and sort of changed our idea of the president, and has now, got a wedge right into reality and is splitting it open. And because of that splitting open of reality, the thing that's breaking, and the thing that has to break, the thing that we have to go through as Americans and as people in the world, right? Because again, America and the world it's all the same fight. We're all in the same fight, right? Everyone is in the fight. Everyone in the world has a stake in what happens in America, because what happens in America is going to affect the whole world. And so everyone has a stake in this fight. So when I say America, it ain't, I'm not trying to exclude anyone in the world. Everyone has a stake in this fight. And so here's the thing: when you get this kind of art that is produced and has this kind of an effect, and you start hearing this point of view that the dollar ain't shit, one of the big weaknesses Bitcoin had in America was the patriotism and the pride and all of that stuff infused with the US dollar. And I've said it was a weakness and a blind spot that Americans had for a long time. And it was something we had to get over. And I've said for a long time that World War III, right, is very different from World War II. World War II was, okay, America beats other countries. And so when people think about World War III, they think it's the same: America and China, America and Russia, right? No. World War III is the idea of countries against the people, right? It's not countries against countries, it's countries against people. And this has been my frame of World War III since I started in Bitcoin, right? Not everyone, many people who came to Bitcoin early understood the fight that was starting. It was going to be a recalibration of the government, a recalibration of how money was created, distributed, and the government's role in it. And the follow the money situation that we see in climate change, and the follow the money situation we see in Ukraine, and those types of things, our ability to follow the money is what had led us blindly into this situation where if we didn't get bailed out by the Federal Reserve in 2008, it was catastrophe. The whole world was going to collapse, right? Or at least going to be something totally different than what it was. And there was going to be a lot of trouble, right? So everyone who understood that we had gotten ourselves into real trouble in 2008 and embraced Bitcoin because it offered a solution to those problems by separating money and state and reconstituting how we organized ourselves, probably with much weaker states than we ever had before. Because we simply can't pay for it anymore, right? We can't pay for everything we built to win World War II to be persistent and exist still in World War III. So now that this guy's come out with this song, right? To me, it is one of the signs, right? And we've seen it many, many times. Conservatives have said this many times, and there are a lot of people who believe this, right? That actually politics are sort of downstream of culture, right? It was a sort of a cliche for many years amongst right-wing people, but in so many ways you can start to see that it holds some grain of truth, right? You can actually flip it. Some people flip it, right? Some people see it the other way around. But what you're seeing here is, I think anyway, an awakening inside of one of the most persuasive parts of American culture: music. Right? Music is one of the most persuasive parts of American culture. It's much more persuasive than the news, much more persuasive than all the bloggers and vloggers and everything out there, right? Music can still get into your mind and completely alter how you think about the world. And to start seeing a kind of anthem like this that has that sort of slogan, "The dollar ain't shit," right? That's a feeling that I think a lot of people haven't been able to put into words for a long time. And now that this is out, you're going to see this type of thing, right? This type of frame: your dollar ain't shit, and they'll tax it to no end, right? You're going to see that kind of thing catch on and become more important. And the other great news is that, and Glenn says, yeah, music is my job and new music is essentially dead. So it is time for a rebirth. Absolutely, right? It's absolutely time for a rebirth. You've got Turdemeester, who spoke about that exact thing, right? So here's Turdemeester on that subject. He says, I downloaded it here. Where did I put it? Where are you, buddy? Did I really not fucking download it? Ay. Let me just find it. I was sure I put it in there. I was sure. But I got it. Don't you worry. So who might be at Bitcoin Amsterdam, he is from Amsterdam, he says the following. He says, the groundwork for rock and roll was laid by the sober, heartfelt blues from the Great Depression. That music, in turn, formed the basis of the iconic music of the 60s and 70s. Is the cycle repeating? And I think so, right? I think the cycle is indeed repeating, and you're going to get this really powerful cultural movement that will help push people's minds. Because look, there's this song is more or less a Bitcoin sales pitch, right? By talking about the system and the way he does, and how honestly he does it. You can't manufacture that, right? And now, luckily, this comes at a time where we see exactly what Glenn is mentioning here, right? We've got a problem with music, and that the culture itself is sort of stunted. Well, here's just a wrapped up in a bow. It couldn't be more beautiful, right? So you get Billy Porter, right, who is a Broadway actor, right? Who we support. I got no problem with Billy Porter, right? So what I'm about to say has no problem with Billy Porter. He is a victim as far as I'm concerned. But here he's saying he's sort of helping lead the Hollywood strike. I don't know what you want to call it. He's a story in the Hollywood strike. Okay, so the Hollywood strike is going on. Writers, actors, no one's making money. You might not have noticed because no one cares. Right? Nobody gives a shit. Late night talk shows, which are absolute mockingbird assets. All these losers who come on. Oh, did you hear what the president said last night? Oh, the president is really silly. Oh, my writers wrote that. These guys, Steve Colbert. It's the same joke every night. I wasn't able to watch one episode of Jon Stewart in my entire life. I can't get through any of them. Jon Stewart, Steve Colbert, since I was, a young kid, I could not watch it. I could not even be in a room. I remember in college and all that, people, let's watch Jon Stewart tonight. I'd leave. I gotta go home, guys. I wouldn't make a fight about it, but I'd say this is pretty dumb. Like, it's the same. Oh, hey, the president, he's crazy. It's the same joke. It's literally the same joke all day, all night, all the time. And these writers, right, now that they're all on strike, and now that no one's watching these shows anymore, nobody cares. No one noticed that they're gone because it sucked. It only was there because, people have to put a TV on in the airport, right? That's how these things persist. So here's Billy Porter, who we do not have a problem with, right? I am not criticizing Billy Porter, but this is what he says. Billy Porter needs to sell his house due to Hollywood strikes, and people are trying to make a big issue about it, right? Oh, they need help. When are we going to get back at the big studios? When are you going to support the artists, right? When is the strike going to be over? We're selling our apartments. You've starved me out. I'm an artist. You can't do this, right? And now Lauren Chen comes out and says Hollywood has never stopped mocking and laughing at people who lost everything due to vax mandates and indefinite lockdowns that they wholeheartedly champion, propagandized at every turn. Please spare me the crocodile tears about starving me out, right? And I think that is exactly it. So imagine at the same time as you have an actual starving artist, right? The dollar ain't shit guy, and you get ain't got a dollar, right? That's his Twitter handle, ain't got a dollar. So ain't got a dollar. And if you didn't know the story of ain't got a dollar, right? I think it was just a month ago he did the sort of I got no money, Jesus come into my heart thing. There's a fella who wrote the whole story. He helped pay for it pay for this album to be recorded. It's obviously going to be a huge hit now, right? Obviously going to go crazy popular. That's an actual starving artist. No strikes or anything like that. And so he's going to go out and get a bunch of attention while all of Hollywood is sitting, oh, it's not fair. It's not fair. We got to get that late night stuff back. Oh, the president. Oh, what did he do? Right? That kind of stuff. So it ain't going to happen. That dog ain't going to hunt, right? That dog ain't going to hunt. Meanwhile, right, within the whole context of what this guy is singing, right, the Rich Men North of Richmond, right? That's the name of the song, by the way, Rich Men North of Richmond. At the same time, you get, like I said, you get artists that were laughing at the, don't worry about why don't you just stay home, right? I don't know, just stay home during COVID. What's your problem, idiot? Stay home. So the tension there, right? These cultural tensions that have never been diffused ever, right? We're just left with them. You get people like this, right? You get Jonah Goldberg on CNN yesterday. This actually came out of his mouth, right? Now, again, Jonah's not at the space drop level because no one knows who he is, right? So you can only really do space drops when we do the Nuremberg 2 thing with like famous people, right? Jonah, you're not, we don't care what happens to you. Maybe we just drop you in the ocean. Who knows? But this is actually what he said live. He said this out loud in the climate that we're in. Okay. And if you don't think this is going to cause more and more people to doubt the United States, because this happens every day now, right? These people there would be, I think, fair-minded Democrats who would hear this and run away. Because it's going to be about donorship and politics, campaign donorship. The one thing I'll always admire Ilhan Omar, before I even explain this, right? I just want to set it up so you see where I'm coming from and how people are going to peel away, right? This isn't about me convincing people, right? It's not about you convincing people. It's about how people are going to be convinced by what's going on. So here's a compliment I want to pay Ilhan Omar, and it's I think so. If you don't know who Ilhan Omar is, by the way, she is a Somali-born congresswoman from Minnesota who claims to be a very strict adherent of Islam. We'll see. I don't know. But here's the thing. When the trucker protests were going on in Canada, the same journalists, right, who are worried about where the late night talk show people and why aren't people taking an opinion, this stupid journalist in Canada, right, was jumping on one of the ladies who ran a cafe in Ottawa about donating $20. Right? This woman said she didn't donate, and then try to use the actual newspapers in Canada to shame this person and to get like attention. She doxed them, crazy shit, right? Crazy shit. Ilhan Omar stood up for that small donor. She did, right? She told the journalist, "You're disgusting. You're disgusting." And this is the type of journalist, I think, lefty, who would be like, "Oh, Ilhan Omar insulted me," right? This would be a big problem for her. This would be embarrassing, as MSNBC is always reminding us we should organize our life around what embarrasses us. So don't be embarrassed, right? So, stop the stuff. It's embarrassing. So it worked on this idiot journalist. Oh, it's embarrassing, right? So she obviously stopped her hunting down of a coffee shop owner in Ottawa for $20 donation to the truckers, right? Because Ilhan Omar is small donor backed, which you have to respect, right? If she can go and do what she does as a small donor backed person, she's Jevi. I agree 100%. I am not supporting her as an overall congresswoman. What I want to do is just show that I can appreciate the difference between small donors and large donors, and if someone does have a small donor base, they have their chance. I have no problem with them disagreeing with me, right? I have no problem. I can live with it, right? So now, how she gets the small, I don't know, right? I don't know, but I will say, she stood up for the person, right? She stood up for this person in Canada, and I was impressed, and I have to remember that I'm impressed with what she did. Right? Like, I'm not going to forget it. Like, I really, really, really genuinely did appreciate it. Right? But here's what Jonah Goldberg says on CNN. Right? This came out of someone's mouth. Please understand, this came out of a human being's mouth who thought this sounded intelligent. Right? Small donors are actually one of the biggest problems for democracy and the GOP. Large donors actually have a strategic view about moderation, who can win and who can't. Small donors are really just venting their spleen with their credit card, right? That's actually what a human being said. Now, again, all I mean to do I would never vote for Ilhan Omar, by the way. Okay, she's not getting my vote. What I'm just saying is, she gets small donorships. She would never say anything as mentally handicapped as what this person said, ever, right? Large donors are more democratic. Think about what you have to do to your brain to make that make sense. Think about what you have to do, right? And it makes no sense to anyone. No one would believe this. This is what another case of what lying or cognitive dissonance looks like, right? This is a broken brain. Oh, the GOP's big problem is too many fucking loser poor people like them and give them their $20 to fucking help change the world. Right? What a bunch of idiots. They're so embarrassing, so stupid. What's wrong with them? Well, the good news is, right? The good news is, and this is why I continue to use the frame of the 1500s as the frame to understand what Bitcoin is doing today, because in the 1500s, 500 and something years ago, when Martin Luther began the Protestant Reformation, things looked really similar. And the separation of money and state, the October 31st simulation wink about the white paper being published the same day as the Protestant Reformation, I continue to think the scale of the change is the same size. Luckily, the sovereign individual created a framework for this. Right? They talk about there's no Bitcoin when the sovereign individual is written, but they talk about what leads people to abandon the church and the old Catholic ways and embrace the new Protestant thing. And it had nothing to do with like they're right about Jesus. Right? It has nothing to do with being right about money. Why the change will happen. Right? It's not about being right. It's not an intellectual endeavor. It's what repels and attracts. It's repulsion and attraction. And there's reasons why you'd be repulsed, and there's reasons why you'd be attracted. They are pecuniary, they are financial, and I'll explain it. Right. So here's what he says. Right. He says, little wonder that the common opinion of the late 15th century despised the higher and lower clergy, much as common opinion in highly politicized societies today despises the bureaucracy and politicians. As John Huizinga put it, hatred is the right word to use in this context. For hatred it was, latent but general and persistent. The people never wearied of hearing the vices of the clergy arraigned. Part of the reason that people were commonly convinced that the church was grasping and extravagant is that it was true. The worldliness of the higher ranks of the clergy and the deterioration of the lower grades were too obvious to miss. From the parish priest to the Pope himself, the clergy appeared to be corrupt, as only the personnel of predominant institutions can be. So he goes on, right? Talks about what this means, right? Piety and compassion. He says, so first of all the things they came up with, the superficial crust of piety, right? That they were blasphemous. They did everything that was hypocritical to what they said, right? They said that they rationalized the sort of saturation of society by organized religion in the Middle Ages, and they meant it as like the way compassion today saturates politics, right? That it's meant to justify the political domination of life today. The sale of indulgences to satisfy desire for piety without morals parallels lavish welfare spending to slake the pretense of compassion without charity. It was largely immaterial whether the actual effect of perceived practices was to improve moral character or save souls, just as it is largely immaterial whether the welfare program actually improves the lives of people to whom it is directed. Piety, like compassion, was an almost superstitious invocation. And then he goes on to say downsizing the church, and this is the important part, right? And this is where you start to see what forces actually reshape the world, and you're going to see that people making fun of small donors, people who now can't produce art because the financial wheel is broken. They can't produce it. The financial wheel, you can't actually produce the kinds of movies that we did for years. Like Disney's effed, right? They're effed. They're never going to be able to do what they did. I hope they survive. There's a lot of Disney that I would love to see perpetuating in the future. Nothing that they make today, obviously. But here's what he says about downsizing the church, and you're going to see why the dollar system is coming to an end. He says, by the end of the 15th century, the church was not only as corrupt as the nation state today, it was a major drag on economic growth. The church engrossed large amounts of capital in unproductive ways, imposing burdens that limited the output of society and suppressed commerce. These burdens, like those imposed by the nation state today, were numerous. We knew what happened to organized religion in the wake of the gunpowder revolution. It created strong incentives to downsize religious institutions and lower their costs. When the traditional church declined to do this, Protestant sects seized the opportunity to compete. In doing so, they employed almost every device imaginable to reduce the cost of living a pious life. They built spare new churches and sometimes stripped the altars of older ones to free capital for other uses. They revised Christian doctrine in ways that lowered costs, emphasizing faith over good deeds as a key to salvation. They developed a new terse liturgy, paired or eliminated feast days, and abolished numerous sacraments. They closed monasteries and nunneries and removed giving alms to mendicant orders. Poverty went from being apostolic virtue to an unwelcome and often blameworthy social problem. To understanding how the church liberated productivity, you have to review the many ways the church stood in the way of growth before its monopoly was broken. Much as the nation state does today, the church at the end of the 15th century imposed incredible burden of excess costs. So the direct costs like taxes, tithes, and fees, they all went away, right? Religious doctrines, this is an important one. Religious doctrines made saving difficult. The arch villain of the medieval church was the miser, the person who saved his gold at the risk of his soul. The requirement for the faithful to fund good deeds entailed costly contributions to the church. The doctrine of satisfactions obliged those concerned about salvation to endow masses or chantries in order to avoid purgatory. So that all changed, right? You can now save money. Well, what is Bitcoin actually offering? You can save your money. It ain't the dollar ain't shit and they'll tax it to death. It's not that, right? And having an anthem about that, I think, tells us at what point in the game we're at, right? I think it gives a pretty good indication of what point in the game we're at. So ideology, all the relic stuff was gone. They didn't have to collect and all these stupid things, right? The economic monopolies wore off because the church was imposing those, right? And it goes on, right? There's all kinds of things. The vast amounts of assets to low yielding returns. Finally, there was a great reckoning, right? And that great reckoning led to the nation state, which took over the void left by the collapsing edifice of the church, right? So that's what happened. And if you take all of that as one, right? If you put it all together and you think about what's going on, if you think about it in terms of the change, it's similar. The 1500s start to look a lot like today, and there's a number of reasons why, and it's why I use this sort of thought experiment or way of describing it, right? I go back to the World War II piece, right? World War II about countries versus countries, World War III about countries versus people. And the idea that I had, and the thing you have to accept about this, right, is that America, the country, has to lose World War III. Now, what does that mean, right? I don't like it's hard to say that you want to see a country lose a war, right? What does that mean exactly? Well, it kind of looks like this, right? I don't want to see anyone dying. I don't want to see anyone invading America, obviously, right? That's not the kind of way I think America can lose a war, even. I don't think America is invadable. I don't think you can invade America, right? Good luck. You're going to have a lot of trouble, right? As Lincoln said, no one in the world will ever take a peaceful drink of water from the Mississippi River, ever. No foreign horde will ever take a peaceful drink of water from the Mississippi River. And that's true, right? The country is just too big, too full of weapons. It's too late for foreign countries to take over. We can do it to ourselves in America. That's possible, but no one can come and do it, right? Which is what Lincoln was warning about. So what does USA losing a war look like, right? Because again, go back to World War II. The way I explain it is America won World War II, but Americans lost, right? What did Americans get from the World War II win? A fake government from the 60s on, a bunch of people subsidizing a financial system and financial engineers out of San Francisco and New York City, and the policymakers carpetbagging everywhere they went in DC. The rest of the country got hollowed out and lost. Look at Americans today. Stupid, fat, ignorant, poor. That's true, right? That is true. Whether you like to hear it or not, they lost. The rest of the world, now I admire what America did at the end of World War II by paying for the reconstruction of the world. I always think that's an important test America passed, and I would want to do that again and again and again. I love that America paid for Japan and Germany and all kinds of other places. I'm a huge fan of the Marshall Plan, right? Huge fan. I'm totally down with the Marshall Plan. Why not, right? It separates America as far as other countries taking over the world. America, like other countries, would step on other countries, right? At that time, other nations and empires in history. America, and instead of bragging about winning, and again, the gap between America then and second place was greater than at any other time in the history of planet Earth. No other superpower was so far ahead as America was at the end of the Second World War. They're the only country in the world with a nuclear bomb. They faced no real casualties domestically, right? There was, other than Pearl Harbor, there was no real trouble. The rest of the world was wiped out, right? There's no one's going to make an army big enough to compete with America at the time. And America had a choice. They could have just steamrolled and paved the world, glassed everything they felt like, and taken whatever else was around. But what did they do? They paid for the reconstruction of planet Earth. Good for them. And I will always admire America for doing that, right? It's one of the most amazing historical anomalies that ever existed. But World War III is a different story. And it looks like that Americans, right, who didn't really win World War II, can win World War III as long as the federal government loses World War III. And what does the federal government losing World War III look like, right? Well, it looks like that song. It looks like people and the media trying to preserve people in power by lying, right? It looks like what you saw from Tucker Carlson at another show last night, where he got the Capitol police chief on board, and they talked about it, right? And the Capitol police chief said, like, it looked like a scam to me, looked like a setup. They talked about Ray Epps, who still has not been indicted or arrested or anything, even though he said he did, according to the fake news, right? They talked about that. Now we've even got the New York Times running the following headline yesterday morning, right? Conservative case emerges to disqualify Trump for role in January 6th. So here we go, right? Jack Posobiec says it, right? The New York Times just found 2 conservative law professors to argue that Trump should be disqualified for running from office, right? Now, it ain't going to work. Trump, I think, is going to run no matter what. But we'll see. But finally, the mindset comes down to this, and this is what RFK is up to in the past few days. And I think it is the full the loss of America in World War III is in the words that he's saying here, right? And this is what he says. RFK Jr., and this is all stuff we know, right? But the rest of the country doesn't understand it yet. But I think they will. I think they will, because the dollar ain't shit, right? And this is what it is. Follow the money, and the dollar ain't shit. Remember that. RFK Jr. reveals what the media will never tell you about Ukraine. The U.S. wanted this war. According to RFK, President Zelensky had intentions of signing the Minsk Accords, a peace agreement with Russia, over a year ago. The agreement left Ukraine intact, but provided protections for ethnic Russians in Ukraine. Putin started withdrawing his troops. However, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson was sent to Ukraine to kill the agreement. The U.S. marketed Ukraine as humanitarian crisis, yet when pressed, U.S. leaders said that the objectives were regime change in Russia and the exhaustion of the Russian army. The story that we're told, that there was an unprovoked invasion by Putin, is not the accurate story, declared Kennedy. There's another story, and that is that the U.S. wanted this war. Between the dollar, between the Hunter Biden Trump stuff, and Russia Ukraine, and still Russia Ukraine, can we rule out that we're there because of the Bidens? That's what Vivek is saying. Vivek is saying that the whole Russia thing is the Bidens. It is to hide Russia collusion. It is to hide what Trump was after in exposing the money laundering and the scams that are at the heart of the U.S. government. So, look, this is what winning World War III looks like. And I don't think we need any more pieces on the table to understand where the conflict is. Everything is on the table. If we had one of those maps, like a war map with people that he moved along and all that, everything is on the table now. We don't need any more characters. If some more come in, they're just additional. They're just side characters. All the major characters of World War III are now on the table. All the pieces are on the table. We got Twitter. We got Bitcoin. We got Trump. We got RFK. We got Vivek. We got all of these things happening. And on the other side, we got Hunter, Joe, Zelensky, and the mainstream media. Right? In the end, we're up against clowns, and we're not going to lose. We're not losing. There's no way we lose this fight. They can try and try and try with this shit, but the dollar ain't shit. And it ain't going to work anymore. You can't brainwash people with shit money, just like the church found out in the 1500s. If your money is shit and you're making people poor and miserable, they're going to abandon you. We don't need to argue for them to come to Bitcoin first. They need to abandon the old system and then nature abhors a vacuum, and you need stuff to make sense of the world. So there we go. Let's see what I got in the comments. Definitely an unbiased take on Ilhan Omar. Yeah, look, I'm not again, I would never vote for her ever. All right, but we got to acknowledge it. She's not the same as other Democrats. All right, just acknowledge that she's not the same because she has small donors. It makes her different. I'm not the only one who brings this up. I've seen Glenn Greenwald go out of his way to mention this before. So I just want to mention it about her, right? She's not on any space drop simply because of that, right? Simply because of that. It makes her too real, right? Now, I understand some of her constituency might be brainwashed, but and she could be wrong. I don't know if she's brainwashed. I wouldn't say I don't think she would stand for any of this shit if she had a bit more freedom to express herself. So, but again, I don't agree with her about anything, right? Thanks, man. Thanks, Andre. We're doing our best. Yeah, no, Joe, we're not. Fan is not the same thing, right? Cringe people can be base sometimes. Yeah. She can be. Yeah, even a broken clock. Even a broken clock. It's bigger size. It's global. Yeah. Then the Reformation. Absolutely. Yeah. As a consequence of magnitude increase in information printing press before internet today. Yeah, absolutely. It's the same argument, right? It's the exact same argument that we saw. Yeah. Well, glad everyone's agreeing. Way to go, Jeffy. We love it. Based content. The intersection of Vatican II and Catholic protesting culture is quite similar to the contemporary woke ideological control systems and systemic violence from mob democracy. Could be. I can't say I pay too much attention to the current Catholic Church and Vatican II and all that. I got a lot of respect for Catholic ceremony and beauty and aesthetic, but that's the end of it. I don't give a shit. Control through scheming manipulation. Yeah, there you go. That's it. Jose says, and that's one show I've done many times here. It means we go from the United States is to the United States are. Yeah, it's a plural thing. The whole world, the whole Civil War changed that, right? Before the Civil War, it was the United States are. After the Civil War, it became the United States is. We're going back to the United States are. That's what we're headed back to, for sure. Rebirth of American values. We love it. Yeah, we love it. Bitcoin is the spirit of the American Revolution. Now it's also body and soul. Yeah, absolutely. America had no reason to brag. They wanted the world to be grateful while they were surreptitiously being turned into forever debtors. Yeah. I mean, I guess it takes a lot of the meaning out of what I said about America. If you think about it as like, we'll pay for you, but now you owe us a bunch of money. So outsourcing inflation to other nations. Yeah. Devious. What a devious scheme it was, huh? Unbelievable. Declaration of Monetary Independence. Sign it today. We love it. The people are primed. We just need price to surge and all the sleeping Bitcoiners to wake up. Yeah, give it another. I mean, I think we got a year of sideways-ish shit, We'll see. Only thinking left for World War III is all to be revealed and the victory accomplished. It's coming. Tucker seemed queued up. I didn't watch the Tucker interview, by the way, guys. So I saw the numbers are great, but I did not watch the whole thing. So I only saw some clips. So there you go. All right, team. That's all I got for today. I hope you have a great Friday. I ought to see you tomorrow. There's a chance with driving and stuff. I'm going to go back to Montreal probably tomorrow. We'll see. I mean, it's only an hour drive, so it's not like I don't live very far. So we'll have to check it out. We'll see. I think I'll be live tomorrow, but I'll let you know if I'm not. But plan on me being there. I should be there. All right, team. Peace.